good day. I hope you are doing fine. I am Draxler L. Reyes, and the purpose of this video is to help you develop your understanding with regard to the human rights of children and youth. I want you to notice how I use the word "and" to separate children from youth. That is because, in a legal context, children and youth are different. Children refers to any person under the age of 18. On the other hand, the youth does not have any standard age group, even though the United Nations describe them as those people within the ages of 15 to 24. This interpretation is not universally accepted. Definition for youth still varies from country to country. For instance, in the Philippines, youth refers to those people within the ages of 15 to 30. Despite these differences, however, children and youth sympathize in one concern. They are both vulnerable sectors of our society. A child is susceptible to physical and psychological violence due to their weak and innocent nature. So, a child always requires assistance, come what may, in order for her or him to grow up in a safe and a vibrant environment. On the other hand, a child without proper assistance will most likely insert a fork into an electrical socket. In other words, they will do many dangerous and curious things that will put their safety at risk. However, this is just the tip of the iceberg. You can go further down to see what worse developments may a child undergo if not given proper assistance. Hence, in order to prevent a child from inserting a fork into an electrical socket, the United Nations drafted the Convention on the Rights of the Child, or the UNCRC. The substantive part of this convention will be discussed later. For now, we must first understand what a convention is. Convention is an agreement, but it is important to take note that this convention is drafted by the United Nations. From the word nations with an S, this convention is international, or an agreement between countries. The act in which nations sign into a convention is called ratification. Again, a ratification, it is the act in which the nations sign into a convention. So once a nation ratified a convention, they must adhere to the principles that the convention provides. The Philippines signed this convention, the UNCRC, in 1990. Later, we will discuss what principles the Philippines should adhere to. Okay, next. Now, this is a blank slide. Actually, it's not. If you look closely in the bottom left corner of the screen, you will notice the word youth. Youth is known as the often forgotten sector of our human rights system. Why? For one, because they are vaguely defined. There is no concrete definition for youth. It is always arguable whether someone is a member of the youth or not. It is a very vague term. Unlike children who are vested with specific rights, thanks to the UNCRC, the youth, on the other hand, does not have any kind of such. There is no formal document that declares and protects youth rights. That is why, until today, the youth is a primary victim of age discrimination or ageism. So for a short review of their differences, children are those people at the age of 18, while youth does not have a universal standard age group. Children have the UNCRC and the youth does not have any similar documents.
Good day everyone, I am Angel Nicole Austria and now we will talk about the history. The early 1900s is known as the age of industrialization. During this time, fuel-powered companies are growing, thus creating a lot of jobs for everyone. And everyone includes children. The problem is, the working conditions is unsanitary and unsafe, and no law exists that will protect the welfare of children and youth from danger. During World War I, 250,000 teenagers were sent to a bloody battle. If you have watched Peaky Blinders, you would know how not only physically but psychologically demeaning it is for children to take part in such a bloody event in history. Thus, in 1924, these wonderful women, Eglantine Jebb, along with others, campaigned for what would become the world's first International Declaration of Human Rights, or the Geneva Declaration of Rights of the Child, or GDRC. Following that, in 1946, UNICEF was founded. Then, in 1948, UDHR was proclaimed. Until in 1979, Poland proposed that there should be a convention that protects children. Thus, after 10 years of negotiating and debating, the United Nations set out the text of what would become the most widely ratified human rights treaty in history, which is the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Children. The UNCRC is now ratified by 196 countries, and up to date, only the United States has not ratified. With regard to youth rights, similar to children's rights, everything started in early 1900s, during the age of industrialization. The youth was in protest not for convention or treaty or a law. What they want is a higher working pay. The youth is often discriminated because of their age. Sometimes, employers don't hire them because they are too young. Or even if they do, they're often discriminated while working simply because of their age. In 1960s and 1970s, a youth deliberation movement emerged around the idea that young people of any age could and should have the full and complete rights of all adults, and not just the limited ideas that were pushed around by well-meaning adults. This movement spread across Chile, Scotland, and Hong Kong. But up to this day, although youth rights have comparatively improved in relation to 50 years ago, the youth still suffer age discrimination, especially in a workplace that has a huge disparity in employees' age. What we've concluded after all the reading in youth rights is that there's no single universal agenda for youth rights. Instead, it is a fragmented effort that highlights the diversity of youth around the world. Thank you.
I know history is a bit boring, so let us now talk about the current situation or present situation of children and youth welfare. I am Dayan M. Latag and I will report this part. In 1980, 10% of all children born that year died. Fast forward to 2021, that figure has dropped to 3%, even with all the viruses and suicide cases. The world in general still managed to improve the state of our children in a span of 41 years. Question: how did this happen? If you listened attentively in the history of children's rights, you would know for sure that a historical event happened between 1980 and 2021. That is, in 1989, the UNCRC was declared, which, in my own conclusion, played the most part for the commendable progress the world has taken in children and youth welfare. However, we have a problem. Even with a fantastic world average, the Philippines is sitting below the 50th percentile of children welfare statistics. In essence, this means that the world average would be better if only the Philippines weren't a factor. As Sherlock Holmes put it, don't talk out loud. You lower the IQ of the whole street. But how? In 2015, a report was published by the National Baseline Study on Violence Against Children, showing that 3 in every 5 Filipino children have experienced some form of physical violence during childhood. In clinical psychology, there is the term multiplication effect. This means that all the violence a child has suffered in his younger years, whether small or hunting, will multiply itself through the child's personality as he goes on further in adulthood. We may not notice it, but a huge factor of us show how much physical violence we've experienced as a child. Another trending issue in the past years is online sexual abuse and exploitation of children. According to the Civil Society Coalition on the Convention of the Rights of the Children, the Philippines emerged as the leading source of child sexual exploitation materials globally, with around 2 out of 10 children at risk of online sexual abuse and exploitation of children. In the field of healthcare, we suffer from a significant lack of health workers and pediatricians. Also, less and less child is being vaccinated with immunity boosters, which is evident in 2019 measles outbreak. In the brighter side, by virtue of RA 10931, underprivileged Filipino students can now enroll themselves in state universities for free, creating more opportunities for children and youth to enter their desired career.
Good day, I am Kaisel Carolwesa, and now let us look at the laws. As instructed, we categorize these laws by whether it is international or domestic. Let us start with international laws. So, human rights of children and youth are contained in human rights documents, including first, Convention on the Rights of the Child, UNCRC, second, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, UDHR, third, international covenants, fourth, Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women, fifth, Convention Against Discrimination in Education, sixth, Industrial Labor Organization Minimum Age Convention. So among these, UNCRC set out the most comprehensive list of children rights. So the provision of UNCRC adheres to four principles. The four principles are first, non-discrimination, second, best interest of the child, third, right to life, survival, and development, fourth, giving due way to the views of the child. Non-discrimination states parties shall respect and ensure rights to each child without discrimination of any kind irrespective of the child's or his or her parents or even the legal guardian's race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national, ethnic, or social origin, property, disability, birth, or other status. Non-discrimination refers to each child's right to access to equal protection and services regardless of their sex, their race, the one that I mentioned earlier, and other arbitrary characteristic of a child has randomly acquired in the absence of his free will, such as his origin. Just like in Scotland, where a kid named Bobby lives, Bobby was rejected from a school he applied for. So why he got rejected? Because he suffers from ADHD. Thus, his parent filed a case in the court. It's also important to take a note that Bobby is not his real name. Whether a child is involved in a case, the state is obligated to protect the child's identity by the means of alias or AKA. Going back to this alias, Bobby won the case. And here's what is the mother said afterwards. We're delighted that this case, with thanks to the Equality of Human Rights Commission, support parents and make an example of discriminatory exclusion in independent school. Children living with disabilities have often been subjected to many injustices in their short lives. Being unlawfully excluded from school should not be another one to add to the list. We hope that this gives confidence to other parents of children with special education needs that they do not have to stand there and watch their family being discriminated against it. So after his society, a child goes home to his family. Except not every child has a complete family to return to. Some child has to choose between his mother or his father or maybe an orphanage or a relative. For this reason, best interest of a child is a principle adhered to specifically in the Article 3 of UNCRC. So, in this article provides all actions considering or concerning children whether undertaken by public or private social welfare instructions or institutions, court of law, administrative authorities, or legislative bodies. The best interest of the child shall be a primary consideration. This article became ground for its states parties to guide their competent courts in making a wide range of decisions that affect children's. Because often these decisions are very sensitive for the child's development, which includes placement, custody choices, safety and permanency planning, and parental rights termination. So when the court reaches such a decision, judges must consider whether the decision is in the child's best interest. So there is no universally accepted definition of best interest of the child, only that it is understood as the necessary and primary consideration of adults and courts towards children during the determination of an outcome such as what kind of service, actions, and directives will serve a kid, as well as who is the best qualified to take care of a child. These decisions are sensitive and guided by a number of criteria connected to the child's and caregiver's circumstances. It requires and considers a framework of factors in order to predict what is the best for the child's development. So clearly, a child's best interest is rooted fundamentally to his life, survival, and development. So the third one, the right to life, survival, and development of a child can be interpreted as civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights. So it is civil and political because a child is entitled to be free from acts or commissions intended or expected to cause his or her unnatural premature death. So as a child, or as a premature human being, it is your civil right to be taken care and live as a civilian, from which is not fulfilled, which also deprive you for any political rights. Because how you can participate in political activities if you haven't developed a safe and educational environment. It is economic, social, and cultural because the life survival and development of a child includes creating an environment that will ensure the child's dignity, such as access to clean water, proper nutrition, security, and shelter. It is economic because as a child, we have economic demands, such as access to clean water. It is a social right because we demand the opportunity to participate in social activities for the environment. And as a cultural right, we can think of it as a right to learn our modern language. So other international laws also provide for the rights of the child for life, survival, and development, such as UDHR and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights.
Hi, I'm Kairoshin P. Bongas, and this will be the continuation of the principles in international laws that are tackled a while ago. Now, let's move on uh, to our last and fourth principle. A child has the right to be heard, and his opinions must be given due weight in accordance with Article 12 of UNCRC. States parties shall assure to the child who is capable of forming his or her own views the right to express those views freely in all matters affecting the child. The views of the child being given due weight in accordance with the age and maturity of the child. So, children's right to be heard is an interesting discourse, for that they do not have the full autonomy of an adult, but they are still heard because they are the human subject of the decision to make. So let's say that they are not the best people to hear due to their knowledge, age, and maturity or level of maturity. So bakit pa rin sila dapat pakinggan? So the reason why they are still heard is because of the fact that the whole thing is all about them. The whole decision is for their best. So even if they are not the best people to talk to, they have still the rights to be heard, and their opinion must be given due weight in accordance with the fourth principle. Simply because of what I've said earlier, the outcome of the decision is for their best. That's why their opinion is really needed sa mga ganitong usapin kasi sila yung maaapektuhan ng magiging decision. So, other conventions also provide full children rights. And one of them is Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. States parties condemn discrimination against women in all its forms, agree to take all appropriate measures, including legislation, to modify or abolish existing laws, customs, and practices which constitute discrimination against women. So, dahil napakahaba nito, to make it short, this law specifically provides for non-discrimination of women of all ages and aspects, including cultural patterns, education, healthcare, and legal concerns. So we have a question here. What is woman? Although woman doesn't have a concrete legal definition, it is generally assumed that it includes everyone with an XX chromosomes. So, masasabi natin na babae yung isang tao kapag meron siyang XX chromosomes kasi magkaiba naman ang chromosomes ng babae sa lalaki. But some states may specifically provide a more inclusive definition depending on their local civil movements on LGBTQ+ rights. Another example is the Convention Against Discrimination in Education. So, the states parties undertake to discontinue any practices which involve discrimination in education, to formulate, develop, and apply a national policy which or will promote equality of opportunity and of treatment in education. So, this was drafted to demotivate unfair practices in educational institutions. So it aims to encourage and guide its state parties towards quality education that promotes a safe place for learning. And also, it also promotes free education. So, even if the education is free, may mga pamilya pa rin na nire-require yung indirect financial assistance to sustain the needs or the educational needs of their children. So these needs includes laptops, internet connections, books, and kung ano pa mga bagay na makakatulong dun sa pag-aaral ng kanilang mga anak. However, for some families, this is just way too expensive. Kaya yung ibang bata, they choose to work instead of pursuing their wanted diploma, pursuing their dream, or ipagpatuloy yung pag-aaral nila kasi hindi naman talaga is lahat afford yung mga ganong bagay para sa mga pag-aaral nila. However, it is very a sensitive topic whenever employment and children is enjoined in one idea. So, a poor policy framework for child labor often result to a human trafficking and child exploitation. Hence, we have here the ILO Minimum Age Convention. So, it provides a comprehensive list of guidance that safeguards children's rights from the dangers of capitalism and employment. With regards to the rights of the youth, as mentioned previously, there is no universal age group that defines youth. But with respect to the definition provided by the United Nations, the UN General Assembly adopted the World Programme of Action on Youth, or WPAY. So it outlines 15 priority areas, and every 2 years, they negotiate with the General Assembly to update such priority areas. So these 15 priority areas of WPAY are education, employment, hunger and poverty, health, environment, substance abuse, juvenile justice, leisure time activities, full effective participation of youth in the life of society, decision making, globalization, information and communication technologies, HIV or AIDS, armed conflict, and intergenerational issues. Okay. However, the implementation of WPAY is significantly lacking due to its non-binding nature. So, non-binding nature, andyan din po, means having no legal or binding force. So, WPAY is unlike the UNCRC that is legally binding. So, it means if the state signed in UNCRC, they are obliged um, to adhere the principle of UNCRC. So, because WPA is non-binding nature nga, the youth remains to be the often forgotten group in the world's human rights system.
Good day, everyone. This is Jessica Christine V. Carandang. Earlier, the international laws were discussed. Now let's go local. The Philippines ratified the UNCRC in 1990 and has served as a guidebook for legislative bodies in furthering legislations for children. A famous domestic record that contains a few direct provision for the rights of the children is the 1987 Philippine Constitution. Some of them are stated in Article 13, 14, and 15 of the said Constitution. The Republic of the Philippines, by the virtue of the Presidential Decree Number 603, otherwise known as the Child and Youth Welfare Code, signed by the former President Ferdinand E. Marcos, provided a comprehensive dictum for children's rights and responsibilities as well as the duty of the parents in the development of their child. This code also provides guiding principles, in some cases not limited to adoption, abortion, and delinquency. To cite an example, this is what the Child and Youth Welfare Code Article 27, Paragraph 2 says. In all cases of adoption, the adopter must be at least 15 years older than the person to be adopted. Some of the provisions for the children are also provided in the following codes. First is the Civil Code. It states that legitimate and legitimated children shall principally use the surname of the father. The Family Code says that illegitimate children shall use the surname and shall be under the parental authority of their mother, and shall be entitled to support in conformity with this code. Last, the Labor Code. It states that no employer shall discriminate against any person in respect to terms and conditions of employment on account of his age. Arguably, child labor is one of the most controversial topics in children's rights, sitting right next to sexual abuse. It is often associated with exploitation. Thus, the Republic Act 9231, or an act providing for the elimination of the worst forms of child labor and affording stronger protection for the working child, was signed into law on December 19, 2013. This law provides a special protection for the children through the implementation of the minimum employable age and hours of labor that is appropriate for the child. This law also prohibits the involvement of the children in any worse form of labor. Sanctions are also provided and stated in violations of this special law. We also have the Republic Act 9262, or the Anti-VAUSI, the Anti-Violence Against Women and Their Children, and the Republic Act 9710, otherwise known as the Magna Carta of the Women. This law seeks to address the prevalence of violence against women and their children in the country.
There is also RA 9344, or the Juvenile Justice and Welfare Act of 2006, which protect children in conflict with the law. For example, the right not to be imposed a sentence of capital punishment or life imprisonment. Presently, last March 4, 2022, RA 11648 was passed increasing the age of statutory rape from 12 to 16. This was praised by Save the Children, world's leading independent children organization. For the Philippines, finally recognized children right to and need to protection from sexual abuse and exploitation. Other domestic laws, the children and the youth enacted in the Republic of the Philippines include Anti-Child Pornography Act of 2009, RA 9775, Anti-Trafficking Person Act RA 9208, Children Televisions Act of 1997, RA 8370, a specific law that were enacted for the youth. There isn't many, but if you can remember, youth is defined as those people within the age of 15 to 30, RA 8044, or the Youth in the Nation Building Act in the law that provides such youth rights are also organized in the 1987 Philippine Constitution. However, there just aren't many laws, especially enacted for the youth due to the disparity between the member of the group. A minor portion of the youth benefits from children right, while a big portion of them, as RA 6809 provided, are part the age of majority or 18, thus vested the rights such as right to vote, right to assemble.
The child is one of the country's most valuable assets. Children and young people have the same general human rights as adults, specifically their rights based on their needs. They should be treated fairly as we treat adults because they are more exposed to problems of mistreatment, exploitation, discrimination, and violence. Many people disregard them and believe that they have no capabilities on doing the right things and ended up making it the wrong things. They are also the easiest victim of abuses of power by their parents, teachers, or government. Children's rights include health rights, their freedom of expression, their right to participate in all matters that directly influence their well-being, or their right to be protected from any form of violence or discrimination. Another, youth right is still vague until today. A more concrete legislation or document specifically for the youth would help them increase their competency in life. So, we as a youth, we should not tolerate the wrong actions of other people, specifically when they are underestimating our rights, because tolerating the wrongdoings is also misleading them from becoming a better person and leading us from becoming a weak person. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rana Sibilia from CR1A. So, based on the findings, the researcher recommend implementing the best interest of the child since young persons are vulnerable the court should be focused on the best interests of the child, wherein their decision and services would give the child happiness, security, emotional development, and who is best suited to take care of the child. So, children and youth who are unaware of those laws will be educated and have the right to defend themselves for an instance if they will be in a complicated situation. So last, we can use our social media to share our opinions, disseminate information about the important issues to us in order to transform things in a fast and sustainable way. So in this platform, we can create a virtual participation tool for children and youth. So we can also amplifying their voices together in order to be heard by decision makers at the highest levels.
Also, humanity in general is progressing towards creating a better and improvable environment for children and youth to live in. However, to be particular, in the Philippines and other third world countries, it is not easy to shift uh, and keep up with the ongoing demands for children rights due to economic surprises. For example, 100 years ago, no one predicted that cybercrimes would exist. Thus, when it happened, even first world countries were shocked. So we think that development in technology is one major key area to be prioritized when it comes to children rights. Also, youth rights is still vague until today. More concrete legislation or documents specifically for the youth would, I think, help them increase their competency in life. Uh, and another thing, the government should play their role as protection actors for children. However, a study conducted by Roche and Flynn found out that out of 21 participants, only one was regarded or admitted by the DSWD due to the severity of the abuse that participant has suffered. The rest, the other 20, was considered negligible, so they weren't accepted in the SWD and instead they received help from other or either non-governmental uh, organizations, or for most of them, they received help from their neighbors. So lastly, as we move exponentially faster and faster towards the integration of AI technology with our lives, it is not yet too late to set up a separate government body that will oversee children rights in the cyber world. With that, I hope you understand at least a tiny bit of the human rights situation of children and youth. Salamat.